Welcome to r/RedditRevenge. This is a story of someone getting back at someone with revenge after being wronged. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story. The entitled Karen faces a reality check while shopping, leading to a petty yet satisfying revenge. The second story. Betrayal, revenge, and redemption unfold at a fast food chain as a teenage employee seeks justice against a toxic manager. The third story. New management accuses us of theft. Fired. We retrieve discarded merchandise, trade for cash, and celebrate with Chinese food and gaming. And the first story is Karen Family Shopping. I worked as a mid-level manager in a supermarket chain years back. It was before Karen was a thing, but this lady is definitely a Karen. Regular customer, a middle-aged woman, always being super annoying and entitled when she was in the store alone, and really sweet and nice when she was in the store with her family. Let's call her Karen. We talked about Karen a lot. Whenever she came into the store, everyone would flee. Only the poor cashier was left in the store, and Karen would demand the cashier come help her, no matter the amount of customers in line. I was back in the day before all of those silly "the customer's always right and always greet every customer" rules made robots of supermarket employees. We did of course try to help customers as much as we could. Despite being a low-price market, one day during flu season, we had a couple of employees call in sick. No one in the store, no one to fill up shelves, just me and one other employee working the register. Karen came in the store and you could see by the way she walked that she had a really bad day at work and needed to vent, before going home to play Supermom. Needless to say, I was a bit under pressure having no employees in a half-empty store. So when Karen asked for help, I just politely said, "I'm sorry, I simply can't help you right now." We had a couple of employees call in sick, so we're a bit understaffed. Karen asked the other cashier for help, who said the same. Karen then turned to me, asking to speak to the manager. Told her I was it. She didn't believe me. A manager can't be a cashier. She pretty much told me that a real manager would never sink to the low levels of a cashier. I don't mind people tell me I'm an idiot. But don't talk bad about my employees. I told her once again we couldn't spare the manpower to help her. She went ballistic, yelling and screaming that she wanted to talk to the manager. Once again, I told her that I was it. Karen walked away and I thought that was it. But oh no, she walked straight past the employees only sign into the storage. You know, the storage with direct access to the office? The office with the safe full of cash? It was back in the day when cash was king. The office with all the security cameras and override for the alarm system? I went flying after her, leaving 10 people in line. Told her in a pretty firm voice to get out. She refused. She wanted to talk to the manager. I told Karen to get out or I would have to call the police. Karen told me to do so. I told Karen that she was to consider herself banned from not only this store, but from all other stores of the same chain, and the chains under the same umbrella corporation, roughly 50% of all supermarket chains in the country. Karen told me you can't do that. I proceeded to dial the number to the police on my awesome Nokia phone with Snake, pushed the dial button and put the phone to my ear. Only then did she realize her problems and flew out the store, yelling and screaming to other customers not to shop here. The other customers just laughed at her and told her to behave. We didn't see Karen for the rest of the week. Here's the petty revenge part. It was the only cheap supermarket in town, and Karen always used to come with her family on weekends. Being Karen, it's kinda embarrassing to come home and tell your family that you can't shop at the local supermarket anymore. So Karen of course showed up Saturday with her family. She was hiding a bit and had a hoodie on, but I noticed her right away. I made sure to always randomly appear out of nowhere next to Karen. Every time she went to a new aisle, she would see me standing there filling up stuff on the shelves. Needless to say, Karen never misbehaved again. From that Saturday on, Karen always behaved when she came to the store. The next story is How to Get Petty Revenge on Yourself. This is a story that takes place in 2017. At the time, I was 17 and employed at a very well-known fast food chicken chain named after a state. I'd been at this job for almost 7 to 8 months around this point, and had never missed a day, was a very attentive employee, cared about my customers, and all around tried my hardest at my job. My general manager just so happened to be the district manager for the entire area, so about 2 days a week she wasn't in store to help at other ones, and the general manager position was temporarily given to her disciple for the day. We'll call the general manager GM, the disciple D, and my new manager NM for all simplicity purposes. I'd always gotten along decently with both managers, and kinda enjoyed the workplace experience even if I went home smelling like grease. For context, I have to explain. The beef. After about 6 months of working here, I was called into the office while GM was away, and Dee told me that after my 6 months I was liable for a 50-cent raise that she'd felt I deserved, which was awesome considering I had no car and was relying on my mom. She went through all the hoops of getting corporate approval or whatever, and my raise was verified same day. I don't know how it all works. Well, apparently GM was never notified of said raise or gave any approval, which wasn't supposed to be a big deal, considering it was approved by our local corporate office. Hint, hint, it was. She came back the next day and was notified by Dee of the previous day's activities, including my raise. An effing bomb might as well have gone off as soon as it was mentioned. She went on a giant power rage, screaming at Dee about how she had no authority, about how she was going to cost them too much money. I worked 40 plus since I wasn't in school, and about how I had no business receiving a raise considering I was the laziest employee there. I wasn't. She sat in the office all day whenever she was in store, unless we begged her when we were busy. She went on for another 10 minutes or so before we had to open, and since my raise was already approved by 2 members of our corporate branch, she couldn't immediately revoke it and would have to spend weeks explaining why it wasn't deserved or some SH. I don't remember exact details on why she couldn't, but she couldn't. This put me in a bad spot in her eyes. Well, a couple weeks go by and I had just gotten off probation and was genuinely trying to do better at life, so I had decided it was time to get a vehicle. I saved up $500 and bought a moped, got a license, and was just enjoying being alive. Well, I was still depressed enough to where problems were problems regardless. I ended up being admitted into the hospital 2 weeks later after I drove my moped into oncoming traffic and was hit head-on by a passing car. Thankfully, I had all my safety equipment on and had been in a residential area, so I ended up with cuts, scrapes, and a broken leg. After being cleared medically, I was required to be admitted for a psychological evaluation. Had undiagnosed schizophrenia. I ended up being in the hospital for almost 2 months, and the entire time I was in there, GM had been fighting hard to get me fired, but couldn't because the area I lived had highly specific rules against firing people in the hospital, especially for mental health concerns, and it was just company policy to never fire a hospitalized employee. After I got out, my leg was still obviously broken, so I couldn't work, and had went into my place of work to give them the doctor's note stating I'd be out for another 4 to 6 weeks, and GM lost. Her SH. She went on about how I was a faker, how I'd been forging notes and lying to Dee. I'd been giving tabs while in the hospital, and says I never planned on coming back and was going to milk all the unemployment I could out of this. I was still 17 and couldn't apply. I finally had lost my cool and laid into her. I let her have it all about how she was a lame C who had no business being in charge of others, and everyone hated her and how her big A ego was one day going to be her downfall. Then I hobbled out on my crutches and didn't go back. Little did I know how correct I was. I ended up going to apply for a job at a gas station after I was out of my cast, and needed a reference from my last employer, so I contacted her and asked if she'd give me a reference even if I knew how I was gonna go. She gave me things along the lines of, "You never helped me out, so why should I help you?" Or, "With the way you screamed at me in front of customers, I don't think I should even be talking with you, let alone helping you work around people again," and all that good SH. But she eventually got quiet while I pleaded with her that I needed it. And she just finally said, "Okay, give me the number." I gave it to her and she hung up without even letting me say thank you. Luckily, I'd already explained to my new manager about the prior situation with GM, and she was just as disgusted as me. What I didn't expect was for GM to call NM and completely slander my name, tell outrageous lies, and just have no compassion, or brains. The things she said were apparently so vulgar I couldn't get my Christian manager to repeat most of them to me. My manager immediately knew this was illegal. You're not allowed to give a bad reference considering it can literally be taken as slander. But to go absolutely brainless and not even give a reference, but just straight up talk SH about a previous employee, that was way over the line. NM had recorded the conversation after I'd explained the type of person GM was beforehand, and had all the things she said on recording, and the first thing she did, contact corporate and send them the recording. Now, I had no idea that any of this had happened, and wouldn't find out until 2 months after settling into my new job when I'd receive a letter stating that. On behalf of company name, we're embarrassed for the actions taken by GM, and are contacting you to let you know that we have disbanded her current employment, and all future employment opportunities through our company. We fully support if you choose to press charges, blah blah blah. In the end, I never ended up pressing charges because she lost a cozy $16 an hour district manager position, and all possibilities to be in management again. I decided that I was done with her and would happily continue living my life regardless of what she's stated about me, considering none of it fits my character, and court's hella stressful. I would just like to note how she denied me a good reference from an 8-month employment, and now can never get one from the job she's held for over 10 years. From her own D actions. F you, B. The third story is Video Game Stores Trash into Treasure, a rewarding story of being fired. This takes place back in the early 2000s when GameStop was buying up all the little mom-and-pop video game stores and becoming the monster it is today. I was 16 and worked at Funko Land, a used and new video game store where people could trade in their old video games or consoles for store credit or cash, and purchase other used or new games. It was a nerdy teenager's dream job. My coworkers were great and my manager, who we will call Frank, was a fair and competent boss. Fast forward to the buyout. GameStop was buying Funko Land and we soon got a new district manager, who we will call D. D had prior retail managerial experience, but not in the same field. Think clothing or home goods as opposed to video games and electronics. Immediately he started making big changes which seemed to make our jobs a lot more inefficient. For example, we had special small TVs that had speakers that folded in or out on the counters. We used them to set up arcades for customers to try out games, and also to test trade-in consoles and games to make sure they worked before we bought them. They wanted to get rid of all the TVs, which basically negated our ability to quality check the trade-ins. They also wanted to get rid of all the video game guidebooks, which at the time were popular sellers. Whether it was his choice or corporate's choice, who knows? We grumbled but made the best of it. Suddenly, D started really nitpicking on Frank. He lied and claimed Frank had been stealing from the store. We knew this wasn't true because we all did money counts and inventory counts frequently. Not to mention we had security cameras everywhere. He ended up forcing Frank out in order to hire all his old friends from his former place of employment. The new manager we got, who we will call Kelly, was a total B and knew nothing about video games. We could all see the writing on the wall. Anyone who worked under Frank prior would soon be on the chopping block soon. We started to plan our great escape. Remember those TVs and guidebooks they wanted to get rid of? They instructed us to throw all of them in the trash. We very carefully boxed them all up and placed them out back next to the trash. This is important later. During that same week, they started calling us one by one in the back to fire us. I had already put in my 2 weeks' notice a week ago, but I knew they would pull this SH anyways. When I got called back there, Kelly and Dee did the same thing they did to Frank, accused us of stealing money and inventory. I asked to see proof, which of course they had none. I was a real spitfire back then, so I didn't take their BS lying down. It ended with me being escorted out by security to my car. Didn't matter. Our plan was already in motion. Around 2 a.m. later that evening, my coworkers and I drove up to the back of Funko Land where the trash was. We loaded up a TV speaker system and almost 100 video game guidebooks. Since it was trash and out on the curb, we weren't stealing. The next day, we went to the used bookstore in town and traded in all the guidebooks for cash. We ended up with roughly $200, which we then used to go to our favorite Chinese buffet and gorge ourselves on spring rolls and laughter. My coworker kept one of the TVs for himself. We played games on it years after. Found out months later that Kelly and Dee were performing so poorly at the store that Kelly was let go, and Dee was reassigned elsewhere. Revenge is a dish best served with spring rolls. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to know when the new video comes out, and hit the like button to support the channel.